Hey everybody, welcome back for another lecture for vertebrate natural history. Excuse me. The last two lectures we talked about sound, and so now in this lecture I'm going to talk a bit more about vision, or specifically not about vision so much as the other side of it, about coloration, animal coloration, and crypsis. And so starting off with these two pictures, these are both lovely pictures, especially the one on the right for the animal that it shows. But first, I don't remember, on one of the field trips a couple of weeks ago, I don't remember which of you I was talking to, but we somehow wound up in a conversation talking about frog mouths, which are these birds that they're in Australia, they're active at nighttime, and during the day they simply pretend to be a stump. So this picture on the left shows two frog mouths. And if you can't see them, I encourage you to pause the video and look at the slide carefully until you can see them. The baby is harder to see than the adult. And then on the right is a species of vine snake. I'm under the impression that vine snakes, having the phenotype of being a vine snake has evolved within snakes a bunch of times. Offhand, I don't know which species it is. And when I first saw this picture on the internet this morning when I was remaking the slideshow, I could not see the snake at all. Now that I've found it, in spite of the red circle, now that I found it, I can see it. But the point is that this snake is doing an excellent job of blending in with this bamboo because it's the exact same shape as the bamboo and also the same color. So these are two examples of crypsis. These are examples of animals that are trying to not be visually detected by other animals. All right, oh yeah, here's another one. This one made the rounds on the internet a couple of years ago. This is a mammal showing crypsis. There is a snow leopard in this picture. And again, I encourage you to pause the video and look at it until you can spot the leopard. I'll give you a hint. It is staring straight at the camera. And also it is actually pretty big. And once your eyes can see it, it'll be obvious, but until then, it might look like some rocks to you. All right, here are some more examples. So somebody in the class asked me on a field trip why great horned owls have these two little tufts of feathers at the top of their head. The owl that's shown here is an eastern screech owl, but they have the ear tufts as well. I expect you can see it because it has its eyes partially open. But if the screech owl really wanted to not be seen, it would close its eyes all the way, and it would tuck its head down a little bit to hide its bill. And so right here, this ear tuft and this ear tuft both help this animal blend in. A number of years ago, I was on a field trip with some students in a class very similar to our class. And we were standing on a bridge looking down at a sycamore tree below us. And I knew where to look for a screech owl. And so I stopped the students and I said, hey, do any of you see that owl right over there at the top of this tree? And the screech owl was blending in so well to the sycamore that it took the students several minutes to spot it, even though it was just like this picture right here. The owl was sitting right there in an opening facing towards us. And after we looked at it for a couple minutes, one of the students in the class said, hey, there's another owl right next to the first one. And sure enough, I had been sitting there with my binoculars looking at the screech owl for, at this point, a good 5 to 10 minutes. And I had not even noticed that there, 8 inches away from the first owl, was a second owl sitting on a branch. Both of them were holding so still. Owls often form mated pairs, and then they'll perch near each other. So that's what this was. This was a mated pair. And the second owl had been there all along, and I had not seen it. So I had come to think that when we are on our field trips, when we're marching around, there are just owls everywhere looking at us, and they are so good at blending in that most of the time we don't notice them. This is that same species that I mentioned last time, the American bittern. These guys, you often find them in dead cattails, which is what you see in the background of this picture. And as you can see, they have all these stripes on their throat. When a bittern's relaxed and hanging out, they're kind of, they'll have their head down, have a normal bird posture. When it wants to hide, it'll stick its head straight up to best blend in with the cattails. And then here's another picture. While I'm blathering on about birds, I expect some of you were looking at this one instead. This is a gecko. if you can't see it, the eye is the most obvious thing. And then once you can see the eye, maybe that helps you see. Here's its snout. Here's one of its feet right here. Where again, what these animals are doing is they are the same color and the same modeled pattern, and they're blending into the background. So the point of all of these pictures that here are examples of vertebrates that are trying not to be seen or have evolved features in order to be cryptic. So this is not the only kind of crypsis, but matching the background visually is one major type of crypsis. So on the field trip to Bolsa Chica last Saturday, I pointed out to a number of you where there were these ripples. This is reflections of basically sunlight hits water that's rippling, and then the reflections off the water cause this kind of light pattern that dances back and forth. A lot of animals will use motions to be cryptic also if they're in an environment that has movement. So that picture of a vine snake that I showed previously, I was trying to find a good example of this. What vine snakes will do is when there's no wind, they'll hold stock still. And then when there is wind, they will, as the wind is blowing all the leaves, they will move and get closer to the prey that they're stalking. And then as soon as the wind stops, they'll freeze and hold still. And so what they're doing is they're using the motion of the leaves as camouflage to sneak up on prey. And so with the ripples of water, this is the underside of a branch in the tropics where a bunch of bats are roosting. And I remember seeing, coming around the corner, there were ripples like this reflecting on the underside of the branch. And the bats, a ways away, the bats were all holding still and you could kind of see them. But then as we were approaching on a canoe and as we got closer, the bats all started to ripple back and forth exactly like they were this shimmering reflection of water. And they became a lot harder to detect where they were because they were moving back and forth pretending to be this sunlight reflecting on the underside of the branch. I've been trying to find a video of that for years and haven't managed to find it. But my point is that it's another fascinating example of visual crypsis where it's actually the movement of the animal that provides the crypsis. Yeah, here's another example. So a lot of animals that rely on crypsis evolve color patterns that match themselves to the local substrate that they're on. So here are 4 different populations of Phrynosoma blainsvilli. Here's one in Joshua Tree National Park. Here's one in Inyo. Here's one in Lee's Ferry, Arizona. And notice that the substrate is dramatically different, both in the coloration and also like both in the average coloration, but also the kind of the distribution of colors. And the Phrynosoma in each of these places has evolved colors that match the background. This is a really common pattern in lizards. Remember that we've seen Uda stansburyana on lots of our field trips. Uda stansburyana in some populations are basically living on white rocks, and they will be light colored, almost white themselves. And in other places, they can live on black rocks. In fact, one of the places that we didn't get a chance to go this year because of COVID, but that I normally take the class, you can see black rocks and white rocks side by side. And the Uda evolve colors to match the local substrate that they live on. This is one of the things that makes it somewhat hard to tell species. That you can have 4 different individuals that are all members of the same species but look very different because of local adaptation to the substrate. So why is it that all of these animals are evolving crypsis? Well, one major reason is to hide from predators. We've seen shrikes, loggerhead shrikes on a couple of our field trips. Shrikes love to eat Phrynosoma. And so here obviously is a case of an example of a shrike that's caught a Phrynosoma. So this is one that did not manage to imitate the background well enough to escape notice from this shrike. Basically, most animals are eaten by something, or if they're an apex predator, they are trying to eat something themselves. And so both predators and prey are under strong selective pressures to evolve to be harder to see, either by their respective predator or by respective prey. So visual crypsis, a lot of animals live in environments that are different. And so lots of species will do what the snowshoe hare, Lepus americanus, does. So these guys have evolved to molt their fur twice per year. In the spring, as the snow is melting, they molt into this brown plumage, and this is good for blending into, like a patch of dirt or yeah, some dead leaves. And then in the fall, they molt and they drop all their fur and they grow in a new coat, and they are pure white. And that's because they spend the winter, they spend a good 4 or 5 months running around on the snow. And you can imagine this brown rabbit on top of some snow would be really easy for a predator to see. Just like if the rabbit were white in the summer, it would be really, again, really easy for a predator to see. And so they change their pelage back and forth between white and brown to match the background. Arctic foxes do the same thing. Ptarmigan, which is a type of bird that lives up near the Arctic, ptarmigan also do that. And also weasels do that. So a lot of species that live up at high latitudes in places where there's snow covering the ground for much of the year adopt the same strategy that the Lepus americanus does. Another one is that some animals can change their colors on a much shorter time scale. So some lizards can do this. The ones that are the most famous for doing it are chameleons. Chameleons can change the color of their skin in a couple of minutes. But other lizards can also do it. So species in the genus Anolis, the anole lizards, which we don't have here in California, but they do have over in Florida and other parts of the East Coast, they can change their color over the course of about an hour from a pretty dark shade, such as the stick, over to a fairly light shade, similar to the green of these leaves. In past years, students have actually, in this class, have asked me, how does the anole do the change? It has these cells inside of its skin that are, I don't know what the exact mechanism is inside of the cell, but basically the individual cell is doing some sort of conformation change to reveal different pigments, either dark pigments or greenish pigments. But I don't know how the anole is, how it's able to tell what color its substrate is. If it's using its eyes to look at the substrate and then simply, thinking and matching its color in that way, or if there could be something else going on, something more local. All right, so other types of crypsis are provided not by matching the background exactly, but by disrupting a predator's ability to see. And so one really common strategy is to have disruptive coloration. So one hypothesis for why zebras are striped is that the stripes make it harder to pick out the outline of the animal. And that makes it harder for a predator to pick out one zebra to chase when you have a whole bunch of zebras like this, and especially when they get upset or disturbed by a predator, they'll start to move around a lot, and the stripes can, because they break up the outline of the animal, it's harder to pick them out. So Africa in particular has a whole lot of large mammals, obviously zebras, but also wildebeests and gazelles, and basically a lot of the ungulates in Africa are prey to things like hyenas or lions. And researchers have found studying the ungulates in Africa can be a challenge, because if you have a big herd of zebra, if you catch one and put a radio collar on it and then release it back into the herd, the problem is that individual then faces a really high risk of mortality. And the reason is that when you've got a bunch of hyenas that are all converging on a pack of zebras, what they have to do is they have to all decide which one are we going after. And so predators often find using a distinctive looking feature on one individual within a herd is a effective strategy of how to all decide which one to chase. And so when researchers made one look different from all the others, they made it kind of stand out. Anyway, so as we've already said, predators can also use disruptive coloration as a way of making it hard to tell where the outline of the body is. Okay, lots of species, in addition to color patterns, lots of species also use protrusions or projections from their body to break up their outline. So Phrynosoma, around the edge of their body, they have this double row of spikes, large spikes on top and then smaller spikes underneath. What that does is that helps break up the edge of the outline of their body. And actually, I'm going to go back. A lot of birds have a black stripe through their eye. And what it's thought this does is this breaks up the outline of their eye. If the bird were all white or all gray with just a little round black spot of its eye, a lot of animals are very, very nervous about round black things, because that's usually what an eye looks like. And so another type of disruptive coloration is to put a splotch, or a stripe through where the eye is, so that the eye itself is no longer doesn't stand out relative to the other feathers. Okay, another really common pattern that lots of vertebrates show is called countershading. And that's where the animal is light underneath and dark above. And so here's an emperor penguin showing that pattern. And then here's a gray squirrel showing that same pattern, where it's got a light belly and then dark fur up above. And what this does is that this countershading takes into account the direction that predators will be in when they're looking at the animal. So an animal that's countershaded with a white belly, it might seem like that white belly would show up really well, but what happens is that usually you're seeing the white belly of the animal from below. And so in other words, the animal is going to be against a light background. So here's this penguin from underneath, and then here's the surface of the water. When you're underwater looking up, it's pretty light. And so it's actually having a white belly. This is the best way for the penguin to blend in with the really light background. By contrast, if you're a predator that's at the surface of the water and you're looking down at a penguin underneath you, the deep dark water down deep is going to be dark or nearly black. And so by having a nearly black dorsum, an animal like a penguin can blend in with the background that it will be seen against really well. So basically, a lot of animals have this pattern of color shading, a light belly but dark back. And this is one adaptive hypothesis as to why they'd show this strong bicoloration. Okay, another type of mimicry that I've alluded to a little bit already is aggressive mimicry. So this is where a dangerous animal an aggressive animal resembles a species that is not harmful. And so what this does is this lets the aggressive animal not be correctly identified as being aggressive by potential prey. So a bird example of this, we've seen turkey vultures on some of our field trips. Turkey vultures have this really distinctive posture where they hold their wings up in a V. And by and large, turkey vultures are not dangerous to prey. The vulture will wait for its prey to die before eating it. And so animals that might be threatened by a hawk are not threatened by a turkey vulture. Well, a species there's a very small number of them here in Southern California, but a species that's mostly further east over in Arizona is zone-tailed hawk. Zone-tailed hawks look very similar to turkey vultures when they fly. So basically the hawk has the same kind of black upper wing and then lighter colored feathers in the back. They also fly with their wings held up slightly. What they are doing is they are pretending to be a vulture as a way of getting close to prey, such as rabbits. Or another example, so a species I don't think we've seen this year. I think we did. One of the field trips we saw, no, we didn't. Anyway, there's a small falcon called a merlin. Merlins will sometimes eat birds that are larger than themselves, and basically a merlin is the size of a rock pigeon. Rock pigeons have this really distinctive way of flying where when they're flying in to go join a bunch of their friends, they'll kind of have their wings up at a pretty steep angle and they'll kind of fly in to go join their friends on the side of a bridge. And so I've heard stories of merlins mimicking this mode of flying as a way of pretending to be a pigeon until they get really close. And before the other pigeon, and so from a distance, the approaching merlin to the pigeon looks like it's just another pigeon. You know, hey, it's Bob coming to join us. And then the merlin, once it's really close, it then starts to fly straight at the pigeons and tries to catch one. Or here's another example. So snakes do aggressive mimicry also. So this is a YouTube video. That's the tail of the snake right there. And you can see the snake is moving it, trying to make it look like it's a spider. And so that was a bird coming in to try to grab the spider, and then now obviously the snake has just grabbed the bird. So this is a viper that lives in Iran, so it's the spider-tailed viper. Oh, there it grabs the bird. All right, so anyway, that's another example of aggressive mimicry. Yeah, so here's what that tail looks like on that viper. Lots of snakes, the tip of their tail is brightly colored, and the snake will move it back and forth to twitch it around like it's a worm. The spider-tailed viper, this cauda is particularly impressive to look at, but this is not, many species of snake do that. It's not just this one species. Okay, another type of coloration that lots of animals show are aposematic colorations or warning colorations. So in previous lectures, we've talked about how many species of frog are poisonous. These three species are poison dart frogs. These are some of the most venomous species of frog in the world. And the reason why they have these really bright colors is so that they stand out visually to birds and to mammals as a way of telling birds or mammals, watch out, don't mess with me. I'll mess you up if you try to eat me. And then here's an example of a coral snake. Remember, coral snakes are snakes that have neurotoxic venom. So these guys are also, they're pretty small. Like a big coral snake is one that's as big around as your thumb. But they have, their venom is extremely potent. And so this yellow and red and black striping pattern on their body is meant to stand out and make them really visually apparent. But what happens is that when you have a dangerous species that evolves warning coloration, what this does is it invites cheaters, or it invites mimicry. And so mimicry in this context is when you have a visual resemblance between two species that are not closely related to each other. And the coral snakes provide one of the best examples with invertebrates of mimicry. So specifically, there's two kinds of mimicry that occur. So we already said, actually 3 total in this lecture. We've already said there's aggressive mimicry. But the 2 types of mimicry that occur between dangerous species are Batesian mimicry and Mullerian mimicry. So Batesian mimicry is when you have the mimic itself is harmless, but what they're doing is they're mimicking a harmful model. So these species that are all shown right here, these are a species of snake that you as a human would have no problem picking up. If these guys were to bite you, it would not be a big deal. All of these guys are cheaters. They have evolved the coloration of a coral snake, even though they are not venomous themselves. So these are all Batesian mimics of coral snakes. But the other thing, and as I just said, the other thing that happens is what is called Mullerian mimicry. This is where different harmful species evolve to look similar to each other as a way of reinforcing the warning against a would-be predator. So notice that some of these species have red on yellow. There's a saying, red on yellow kill a fellow, but it turns out it's not strictly true. This is also coral snake, and notice that it's red on black rather than red on yellow. Here's another word that's red on black rather than red on yellow. So these are both coral snakes. Notice in this previous slide, all of these guys have red on black, red on black, red on black, red on black, and red on black. So these guys are all false coral snakes because they don't have dangerous venom. But notice that these guys are true coral snakes and have that pattern also. So a basic question is, why does this occur? Why would multiple species all converge on the same pattern? And the reason is that it's advantageous to each individual to have a widely recognized symbol of "don't mess with me." If each species had its own very different color patterning, a potential predator would need to know lots of different color patterns to avoid. But if they all converge and evolve the same color pattern, then predators just need to know one particular color pattern to avoid. So another example of this is that bees and wasps have convergently evolved to have a yellow and black patterning on their abdomen. And so bees and wasps also are examples of Mullerian mimics, where there's lots of species that have powerful stings, but also lots of species that are harmless have evolved Batesian mimicry to take advantage of this mimicry complex. Lots of hoverflies that do not have a stinger have that same patterning because they're pretending to be something that could sting. Okay, so again, we've got these snakes over here on the left. These are the coral snakes. These are the guys that are really dangerous. These guys over here on the right, these are the cheats. These are the ones that are not harmful themselves, but they are pretending to be harmful. And so how you get something like this evolving in the first place is a bit of a mystery, because if predators, if a thing that might kill a snake to try to eat it doesn't know that these snakes are really hazardous, the snake doesn't have, if the predator doesn't know harmful from harmless, how is it going to go about figuring out that it should avoid these snakes over here, and maybe wind up avoiding these also because of the mimicry complex. And so basically the question is, how does mimicry start as a system? Do predators have to learn from experience that these are not prey that they should go after, or is it instead something that they can evolve? Do they have an innate avoidance of this type of color pattern? Yeah, so just to repeat what I just said, so if deadly coral snakes are models, how does a predator first learn if the first encounter that it has is fatal? And how does that, if a model kills the predator and so the predator doesn't learn that, how does that benefit the model? So one possibility is that mildly toxic models are the first ones, and then later they evolve to be highly toxic. And so if they're mildly toxic, the predator could learn and say, oh, I'm never going to do that again, but the predator doesn't die. Or maybe the ones that are now really lethal, maybe they're not always really lethal. Maybe sometimes they bite, but they just make their predator sick rather than actually die. Oh yeah, and here's some numbers. So in North, Central, and South America, there are 56 species of coral snakes. The closest, we don't have these guys here in California. The closest you get to seeing them is that there's a couple of species of coral snake over in Arizona. It's basically you drive across the border and suddenly you're in coral snake territory. And then there's 115 or so species of colubrids that are mimicking coral snake but are not dangerous themselves. And so one possible answer to this conundrum of how do predators avoid coral snakes and false coral snakes is that maybe they've simply evolved an innate set of behaviors to avoid snakes. And so what I'm going to describe next is some research that was done by Susan Smith. She was studying turquoise-browed motmots. This is a type of bird. These guys, they're about the size of a scrub jay. They're not huge, but they're not tiny either. And they've got this big, wicked bill. Motmots spend a lot of time catching butterflies or dragonflies, but they will also eat small snakes and small lizards and other small animals. And so they are a potential, and as we said before, coral snakes and false coral snakes are generally pretty small. And so in the wild, this is a natural predator of coral snakes. And so what she did is she hand-reared 9 motmots from 4 different nests. And the reason she hand-reared them is she wanted to make sure they didn't have any prior experience with snakes. And then she made some clay models of 3 different sorts. The clay was yellow, and she either gave it green rings, or red rings, or a red stripe. And so this has the ring pattern without the right colors. This has the red on yellow colors without the right ring pattern. And this one right here is the pattern that had both the right colors and the right ring pattern of rings going around the body. And so she then, at an appropriate age, she exposed these baby motmots, or these hand-reared motmots, to these different color patterns. And so the yellow and green ring pattern got a whole bunch of pecks. So it's not that the babies are avoiding the ring patterning, or ring, yeah. The models with the yellow and red stripe also got a whole bunch of pecks. So it's not that motmots avoid this color pairing of red on yellow. But when she presented models that were yellow with red rings around them, the baby motmots had never had experience with poisonous snakes before. So there's no social learning or no learning of any sort going on. They would not approach or peck this particular color pattern. And so this result, and specifically because these were from hand-reared babies that had no prior experience with snakes, this result strongly implied that avoiding this color pattern was an innate, like deep inside the brain of these birds, there was this innate avoidance of this particular type of color pattern. Humans, no research has shown that we have that same innate avoidance of this color pattern, but humans are intrinsic nervousness about snakes, there's been some research that has shown that humans also have neural circuits that are tuned to snakes. We are naturally predisposed to being afraid of snakes. It turns out there's a lot of there's a number of vertebrates that do. It also includes other monkeys. We humans, we can overcome our fear of snakes, but the fact that we have this innate fear built into our brains is likely we've evolved it in response to lots of snakes being dangerous for us to deal with. And so the point of this experiment was that this showed that this was also true of motmots. So apparently, in other words, so this is a resolution to the paradox that I raised several slides ago. How does this mimicry complex evolve in the first place? Well, it appears that the snakes are evolving in response to neural circuits in the brains of animals like motmots or like humans that naturally avoid certain color patterns. And in turn, the motmots or humans are evolving in response to the fact that snakes will reinforce that by having this coloration pattern and being dangerous. And so, yeah, so in other words, that's how this mimicry complex, how it's able to evolve in the first place, is that it's relying on an innate aversion that potential predators have. All right, that's it for today's lecture. I hope all of you have a good and safe Thanksgiving, and I will see all of you next week.